So these are kind of the first big questions you want to ask yourself. So you'll want to determine the topic, whether it's going to be about the writing process or just about indie books or books in general, things like that. So try to narrow down the topic to something that, you're passionate about, you can spend hours talking about and working on because there is a lot of work that goes into a podcast. Then you want to think about different names, come up with a couple different ideas, double check and make sure there's not another show that has that name. And if you want to have social media profiles, make sure that all the names are available. And then brainstorm who your target audience is going to be. And this will be helpful for making your marketing plan, figuring out, where your audience hangs out, what kind of other content they're interested in. Um, and a big question, especially for Quilling Cup writers, is whether you want this podcast to align with your author brand or if you want it to be its own entity. So, this is totally up to you, whatever you feel is more appropriate. If you want this to just tag onto the existing social media profiles you already have, then you may want to align it to your author brand. Otherwise, if it's going to be somewhat different, um, you can make it its own thing. There's also a middle ground you could do as well. I mean, it could be its own entity, but you can still connect it to your author profiles. It can still be similarly branded. So just think over what you're most comfortable with and what makes sense for you. Um, and then the last two questions are in tandem together. So how often do you want to record and release episodes, and how much time can you dedicate to the project? So that will help determine whether you can release episodes once a week, once a month, maybe bi-weekly. Figure out how much time in a week that you have to work on this, and then try to go from there to figure out a sustainable schedule, because that's the key, is making sure this is a sustainable process for you and making sure that, this doesn't become another obligation or something that pulls you away from your writing time or makes you feel burnt out later on. Sustainability is definitely the key overall with this. Um, so any questions about these first steps, since I know all of this is a lot? Okay. And even though it might seem like this is stuff to all figure out right away, definitely take a couple days, I mean, even a couple weeks thinking over this, because these are all really big questions. And you may start, thinking of one path to do this. And then, as you're getting more specific and really thinking about the details, you may realize you need to switch it up or you want to take a different approach. So the second round of big questions to think about. You want to make a one paragraph description of your podcast. And you can look at other similar podcasts to get some ideas of, how you want to describe it. Think of some of the keywords that your target audience will be looking for. And then some of those SEO keywords. So then, you can pop up in Google and just be a lot easier to find. And then some other logistics to think about. You can start booking your first guest if you feel like you have everything else in order, or, if you're having scripted episodes, if it's going to be more storytelling, you can start writing those, create a website or a unique page to your author website. And then even if you do have an author website already, I would encourage you to make a separate email for the podcast just so you don't end up getting wires crossed. It could be easy to miss something. So I really encourage you to make a unique email just for the podcast. And then determine if you need to make separate social media platforms for the show, or if you want to include those on your author's site. Um, and then you can even At this phase, I would say in terms of starting to make graphics or logos, things like that, you could do that at this phase, but it might be better to wait until the very end, even after you've recorded a couple episodes, because you could determine after, having a couple guest interviews or after recording your first episodes, you may find something that's, a unique spin on how you want to produce this podcast. And so I wouldn't rush into the graphics and the fun stuff right away. I would say that as one of the last things you do before, having a public presence.